Welcome to part 3 of this 3-part video series honoring our ancestors and talking about Dia de los Muertos. So hopefully you've already seen part 1, which kind of talks a little bit about the tradition itself, where it came from, and kind of how I learned about it and little things about how to celebrate it, just the specific elements. And then part 2, where we built this altar together, and you got to see me add some of the elements and put it together. So here in part 3, I'm going to talk about how to use this in a catechetical setting. Many times teachers want to do this, or catechists want to do this, or sometimes in your parish you want to build an altar and allow people to come and bring their pictures or whatever, and it's hard to get it all coordinated and figure out how to get people involved so it's not just something that's there, how to involve prayer, how to really make it a part of the community. So I'm just going to share a few experiences that I've had and how I've used it and some different adaptations that I've done. So let's start with children. If you're working with a group of children, especially in a classroom setting, and you want them to be all involved, there's a few little things that you can do. One of my favorite things to do is, if the children are not too young, that you're able to help them to make paper flowers, or maybe it's something that you can send home with them and maybe have their parents make the paper flowers at home. The ones similar to the ones that are up in my arch here. And these are bigger ones, so you could teach them how to make very simple flowers. There's a lot of videos on how to do this, or you may have family members or people in your parish that know how to do this. And for a prayer experience that we did at one of our retreats, was they made paper flowers, but we had on the very first tissue paper that we gave them, they could write their intention. And so the children would be able to maybe write the names of the people that have died in their family, all of their grandparents or aunts, uncles, whoever in their family that they want to pray for that died. They could write all the names on different tissue papers, and then you make that into a paper flower and then incorporate that onto your altar, either as an arch, as a string of flowers along the edge. You could just then plant them, put them in different places, however you like. And the nice thing with that is that you can have as many flowers. So if you have 25 kids in your class and you end up with 25 flowers, it's very easy to incorporate them somehow. Even if you just make a little on the floor, put them in a little line around the edge of your altar on the floor. You could do that as well. So there's just a lot of ways to incorporate that. The other thing that you can do with the paper, with different names from the kids, if the kids want to bring in names, or even with any large group, is you can have them write them on slips of paper, and then either have a basket where they just put the slips of paper in, and then that way they're constantly adding names. Or one time what I did for an event that we had was the day before, we didn't tell them what it was for, but the day before we had them take little slips of paper that were probably about 1.5 inches or so thick, and then about yay long, about this long and thick, so maybe 6 inches by 1.5 inches or so, or 2 inches. And we had them take one and write either a family's name, like, the Hernandez family, or, grandma and grandpa, or they could write one name on each paper, or however they wanted to, and then submit all those papers to us, and they were all different colors. And then we took them home that evening, we took them back, and we made a paper chain. And then we did like a little procession to the altar with the paper chain as we offered the names up on the altar itself, on the altar of the dead. So that was kind of a neat way that everyone was able to participate, because they could all submit names, and then all the names are included in the altar as well. Of course, you can always do pictures. My advice is just, if you're going to do pictures, especially in a larger group, make sure you let them know the size of the picture, that it can be either from wallet size to 5 by 10 or something like that, because I did have the experience at one parish where they brought the picture and it was huge, because it was just what they had up on their wall, and we didn't specify, so it was a huge picture and it took up like a huge portion of the altar, and it was a little more difficult for others to add their pictures up to the altar. Or, as I said, you could also invite them to bring symbols. Bring a symbol that represents, your grandparents, or something along those lines. They could do that, especially if they're older children or adults. You could work more with symbols. Another way to include a lot of the of our beloved deceased on the altar without taking up too much space is you could buy a nice notebook, or even they actually do sell books for intentions, or books to list the names of the deceased. Sometimes those can be a little pricey. So really all you need to do is go buy a really nice notebook. It could be any size, and you keep it there with a couple of pens there, and then people at any time can come up and write the names of their beloved deceased in the book itself. For a parish one year, we had a great, wonderful man who was very artistically talented, and every year he would take the names of the people that died from November 1st through the following October 31st or something along those lines. So everybody that died within the year, and he would do them in calligraphy on these beautiful thin banners. and then of paper, and then he would hang them on either side of the altar. So the altar would be in the center, and then on either side there would be these banners with the names of the people that have been buried in that parish. So that was another beautiful way to do it. So these are just a lot of different things that you can do with them as you're constructing the altar. If you're working with a smaller group, one time I worked with the student government of the school, of the parish school, and so I directed them in building it, but it was the student government that was kind of sponsoring this little workshop. So I assigned one kid to bring, you know, the bowl of water, another one to bring the bread, another to bring fruit, another to bring, so since it was only about 10, 12 of them, 15 of them at most, I was able to give each of them a different element or a different item to bring for the altar. And then when it was time to put it together, like I did on this part 2 video, we did it in front of the whole school. And then we invited all the kids to come up and leave their names of their beloved deceased on the table as well. So there's a lot of ways to incorporate kids or adults in the process of this. It doesn't have to be something that you have to build and then everybody can just come and go, oh, this is beautiful, but that actually everyone participates. Now, how do you include this in prayer? Well, since it really isn't a, you know, an official devotion of the church in the sense that there's prayers already surrounding it. There's a lot of different things you can do. What I used to do with the kids when we would build it at the school was we would build it together, and then we would do a decade of the rosary as a whole school standing outside around the altar. So that's something you could do. But you could also intermix it, do regular prayer, and just be in the vicinity of the altar, so to speak. So you could do a full rosary. I know families that have done that. They'll build their altar, invite the family over in the evening, and then they do a full the rosary, you know, as an offering as they pray next to the altar. You could also, you know, use Liturgy of the Hours. You could really do anything that you like in terms of incorporating prayer with using this. So any of the readings from All Souls Day can be used. Any readings for the deceased can be used, and you could just do a very simple prayer service around the altar, depending on where it is. So those are just some ideas that you could do. There's just so much more. Again, I'm going to try and link as many videos and articles as I can find that might be helpful to you below. I do know that some of you that work with really little kids that the little ones that can't make the paper flowers, I will link some websites that I found that have the calaveras, so they can just color, and then you can use those to decorate your altar. You can put them around. You can put names on the paper calaveras that they color. You know, they could take them home, put names of their family members that have died, color them, and then bring them back, and you can use those to decorate as well. There's just so many things that you can do to be creative with this. But the important thing is, I would say if you're using it in a catechetical setting, one, to talk about the tradition itself, that the calavera is not meant to be a scary thing, but you know, to rejoice in the life of the person. Try not to make it so death-oriented, especially for little ones, but really help them to understand the ability to celebrate the lives of the people that have gone before us so that we can remember them. If many of them have probably seen the movie already, Coco, or maybe saw Book of Life when that came out, so they may already have an idea of what it's about. But I would incorporate that with our teachings on heaven, on entering eternal life, on that archway being that entrance to eternal life that they have walked through, and we're just remembering them. We're remembering all the good in their lives and keeping their memory alive within us. So, you know, I would tie it in that way. You could tie it into prayer. You could tie it into the actual feast day of All Souls, and the way that it's kind of became connected with, you know, it's Halloween, All Saints, All Souls, have kind of, you know, incorporate those whole days of celebrating our ancestors, celebrating those who come before us. So there's a lot of different ways that you can implement that into our own catechetical teaching of life, of death, and of heaven, depending on the age group that you work with. So again, just some ideas, some things that you can do. Hopefully that'll give you some help and some way to start. If you're in need of any other help or have any other questions or are searching for other resources, please don't hesitate to reach out. Good luck to you and enjoy this wonderful feast of the Dia de los Muertos.